was going to say it's my fault for discussing next
Hello.
week.
Okay.
Hey!
Welcome.
Sorry.
We're in mid-conversation here. Welcome back to Other Minds and Hands. Maggie and I are here as today is session number 62, and we are returning after the Christmas season back to our opening series. We're going to do a couple more in our opening series, and today we're going to do the one we've been talking about discussing for a while, and that is Dune. We're going to look at, as we've been doing, we're going to do the opening of the book, and then we're going to talk about the openings of two adaptations to Dune. We're going to look at both the 1984 David Lynch film and the 2021 I can't remember the name of the director of that one, but anyway.
1984. Wait, 1984 or the most recent?
No, the recent one. Yeah.
Villeneuve. Same guy that did Green Knight, right?
Right.
I'll look it up.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, the new one. That's the one we're going to be talking about. So, okay. So this was, I think...
Denis Villeneuve.
Villeneuve, right. Okay.
Of course.
So, even before we look at the text of the book, I just wanted to comment on the really striking trend. And I'm trying to figure out, is it a genre thing or what is it, right? But both films strongly resist. I just want to start with the observation that both films strongly resist doing what the book does. Like, as far as the techniques for bringing people into the story, like the David Lynch film could not be more opposite, I think, to the book. And again, I'm not saying, as you know, like, this is not like a judgment on it. This is not saying it's horrible because it does something different. I'm just saying it is remarkable to me how fundamentally, and I really am wondering if this is pointing towards something in the genre, something in the, or at least, like, I don't know what, Hollywood's perception of the genre or something. Anyway, I'll show you more clearly what I mean, but I was overwhelmed almost by that. So, okay, so here's the opening of Dune. The opening of Dune, of course, we get in every chapter, we get an epigraph, a quotation from one of the Princess Irulan's books. Most of them, the vast majority of them, are from Irulan's writings. Not all of them, but most of them are, and this one is. A beginning is the time for taking the most delicate care that the balances are correct. This every sister of the Bene Gesserit knows. To begin your study of the life of Muad'Dib, then, take care that you first place him in his time, born in the 57th year of the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV, and take the most special care that you locate Muad'Dib in his place, the planet Arrakis. Do not be deceived by the fact that he was born on Caladan and lived his first 15 years there. Arrakis, the planet known as Dune, is forever his place. From Manual of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan. Then, the actual beginning of the story. In the week before their departure to Arrakis, when all the final scurrying about had reached a nearly unbearable frenzy, an old crone came to visit the mother of the boy, Paul. It was a warm night at Castle Caladan, and the ancient pile of stone that had served the Atreides family as home for 26 generations bore that cooled sweat feeling it acquired before a change in the weather. The old woman was led in by the side door down the vaulted passage by Paul's room, and she was allowed a moment to peer in at him where he lay in his bed. Okay, we don't even have to read the whole scene. Of course, if you remember Dune at all, you will remember this is the Gom Jabbar test of Paul by the Reverend Mother of the Bene Gesserit at the, encouragement of his mother Jessica, who is also a Bene Gesserit. Now, when I was talking about how phenomenally different the approach to the Dune film is, the story itself starts, it doesn't start like in Medius Res in the sense that it starts in the middle of an action sequence or something like that, right? But one of the things that I like to think about in fantasy and science fiction novels, I'm always very interested in the first chapter of fantasy and science fiction novels. And one of the main things I'm always interested to see is how is the author going to approach introducing us to the world. Right? Because, like, by definition, like, what makes science fiction and fantasy is that there are some differences between these worlds and the world that is familiar and known to us, right?
And that it has certain rules, right? Like, we establish the rules of that world in those opening sections. So that's why it's so fascinating to see why it works the way it works.
Yeah, and do you emphasize similarity? Do you emphasize difference? Right? You know, how do you, and sometimes, like, Harry Potter is an extreme example of, well, okay, not actually the very opening. I'm thinking about the opening sequence with the Dursley, like the opening bits with the Dursleys, not the opening pre-introduction to Harry chapter, but so I guess in the end, that's not as good an example as I was thinking of. I was thinking of the way in which she establishes things as like 99% normal, right? And then we get the deviations from that. But that's in Harry's experience starting in chapter 2, really. She introduces us much more sort of stunningly to the wizarding world, right? The fact that there is this other strange world behind the real world. Anyway, so the approach that Herbert takes in Dune here is he is not explaining almost anything, right? We don't get, in the week before their departure to Arrakis, like, whose departure? What's Arrakis, right?
What's Arrakis?
What is, we don't get any, you wouldn't know from the first, the only one thing I think that is listed in those first paragraphs that gives any sense that we're in a science fiction world at all is the phrase suspensor lamp, right? By the half-light of a suspensor lamp. Okay, and I didn't even read that part. That's in the beginning of the second paragraph after I stopped. In the 3 paragraphs that I read, the Castle Caladan, the ancient pile of stone, this could be medieval fantasy for all we know, right? How far in the future? Is this even the time marker that we got in the epigram? Right, only says the 57th year of the Padishah Emperor, right?
Yeah.
Who's that and when was that? We haven't the faintest idea, right? So, anyway, I'm not saying we don't get anything. We do the main thing, and I agree with Phil. The fact that Arrakis is introduced as a planet known as Dune suggests we are in an interplanetary situation, right? But even that is fairly
Not
gentle.
highlighted.
Yeah, it's fairly gentle. Now we are introduced to a lot of really interesting things, right? I mean, like, so we have a few. So we get a bunch of things. So anyway, let me finish that first point first. We learn almost nothing about the world itself in these, or rather, he's going to leave us to learn that very gradually over the course of the first series of chapters, and it really it takes some time. The 1984.
I'm battling a dog over here. Is that what you're laughing at?
In part, yes.
Guys, Merlin is in great form tonight. Don't worry.
Merlin is choosing to be an active participant in today's discussion. So there we go. Oh, of course, you caught him being quiet and good as can be over there. Yeah. He knew he was going to be on camera.
When I go mute, you know what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Anyway, so in the 1984 film, on the one hand, they follow the book closely in the sense that they start with a voiceover from Princess Irulan, right? Not just a voiceover. We get her face, right? We get stars, really awesome 1980s graphical stars, where you can see the pixels, and then
and they're bright blue.
And they're bright blue, yeah. Which I think is cool, actually, because it sort of evokes the whole Spice Eye thing. I kind of like it. But anyway, and then, but then you get The not just the voiceover, but the, you know, talking head over.
Yep.
Right.
Extreme close-up over.
Yes, of the Princess Irulan. And okay, so I said on the one hand, it seems like the same impulse, right? And it's certainly a nod to the whole epigram thing, right? To the way in which Princess Irulan is in fact used as a framing device in the whole story, like consistently in the entire. She is sort of your guide to the Muad'Dib experience all the way through Dune.
Yeah, you get that introduction of her, and you even have the word beginning, which is really highlighted in the 1984 version of like, it's all about the beginning. Look at us starting the same as the text.
Right.
But it's very quickly, it's not.
Well, what she does is this massive info dump.
Yep.
Right. I mean, we get like
about like the economic structure more than anything else.
We get like 5 minutes of pure exposition. Right. Yeah. Let me tell you this world and how it works and explain
and all the names
and all the yeah.
I mean, every word is new. So like that's cool because sure, great. Here's all the people that we're gonna learn and they're all unique names, so we can tell we're in sci-fi. But I'm not gonna remember any of those as an audience member within like 0.2 seconds.
Yes.
So risky.
Yeah. Risky. I mean, the whole, like, let's begin the story with 5 minutes of exposition is already, especially since it's a short film. I mean, the film is shorter than part one of the new Dune. And yet, they've taken like I think I'm exaggerating. It's like 3.5 minutes or something like that. But it's
a big chunk of the opening, though. I mean, that is what they focus on. There's no other imagery.
No.
There's nothing else.
Nothing to look at. Yeah.
It's just this.
Just her talking to you and explaining exactly what's going on. Exactly. Yeah. Or not what's going on. Explaining the background.
The history.
The history. Yeah.
Yeah. And really the economic history. They talk so much about, you know, the company structures and,
and the spice
the trading routes.
Yes.
And,
yes. And which, by the way, was it a strange choice to me. I mean, I remember I rewatched that film back when we talked about it when we had Dom and Trevor on a while back. Uh-huh. I rewatched that film before then. And I was really struck by the fact that they chose. This is actually a kind of to me an interesting little theme in like motif of adaptation choices. Like, what do you choose to give as spoilers, and what do you withhold? Like, what information do you foreground, and what information do you reveal slowly, or even choose to spring as a shock upon your viewers? Because that was a major. The truth about the guild space travel and its connection to spice, like, that's a secret. Like, that's slowly unfolded. Yeah. Like, we don't find out the truth of that until the end. And the whole point is, like, within the world, it's a huge secret. Nobody knows, right? Yeah. And so we only come to suspect and understand this over the course of, as the book unfolds. And I'm not saying it's critical to the plot or like it's again, and obviously I'm not responding in outrage that they decided not to use that as a, suspense building slow reveal thing in the story, but like to just flat out include it in your 3-minute info dump at the beginning is a very remarkable reversal of that approach. To take something which is slowly revealed in the book and say, FYI, here's the thing, in the first 60 seconds of the film it's a noticeable choice. And so I don't know.
It's a little bit jarring because you're just revealing that off the start. So I guess we're now making that a really important element of this film, is what that is suggesting. So
right. So
if you're bringing that to the forefront and talking about it, then we assume this whole movie is about spice.
Yes, and spice travel, and which is fair on the one hand, right? it's fair to say that, like, because of course the whole climax of the story is focused on the wrestling for power and the fact that control of the spice is the key to power, right? You know, at the end of the day, that's the final conflict, right? The way that the final conflict is handled in the book. So they set that up. I mean, as you say, like, it's all the economics and politics, right? Emphasizing that. We don't get any emphasis on Paul or the figure of Muad'Dib, either as a character or as a mythic figure, right?
And again, all these things are interesting, but you just have to think about it as choices of like, regardless of whether you know the original story or not, seeing that 3-minute introduction in the 1984 version just shows me that we're going to be watching some sort of a fictional historical film about a historical, it just reads like facts. It reads like it's going to be much more of like a drama documentary rather than one that initiates emotions at the very beginning and having a voiceover like we do in the 2021 version, someone who's heartfelt and talks about connection, and we see familial bonds, and it's just this very different
and
focus.
Struggle and suffering, and yeah.
And if you do know the book, then you're seeing these 2 different introductions quite different from the text as well.
Yes.
So you're seeing 3 different ways, and you can see why this would be quite jarring to people of just what.
Right. And well, actually, we might as well move into that, because of course, in the 2021 version, it's very different on the one hand, right? But it's also exposition, like female voiceover exposition for almost the same amount of time.
That I even paused. My husband was here; he's a huge Dune fan. When I was watching the starts again, I paused it and I was like, Zendaya is not the daughter of the Emperor, right? Like, just clarifying. Like, are we just doing this as an illusion, or are we just doing this to kind of say, hey, we remember the 84 version, we're going to have this female voiceover, but it's not the same character.
No, it's not.
But it did take me a minute to be like, wait, right?
Right, I know, exactly. It is the connection is really strong there.
Yeah.
And of course, the strong effect that is created is the very different perspective, right? Instead of the voice of the of power, because she, if I'm remembering correctly, in the 84 version, she doesn't even mention being Bene Gesserit, does she?
Don't think so.
I don't think so. She mentioned being the daughter of the Emperor.
Yeah.
The Padishar Emperor, Shaddam IV, my father, right? She says somewhat smugly, right? So anyway, she is speaking from the position of power and authority. And you can even see in the way that we only see her from like the collarbones up, right? So we don't see much of her dress or anything, but she has jewelry and bangles.
Very stylized, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, you do see like stuff all around her hairline and certain hairstyle, and I think she had a really high collar. It looked like very Elizabethan.
There's wealth and power, like signals of wealth and power there. And so that seemed to be the primary thing that the 21 film was responding against, almost, right? Like, we're going to do a similar kind of info, like scene setting info dump, but instead of doing it from the perspective of the Emperor, from the perspective of, this, pampered, powerful, privileged princess, we're going to do it from the perspective of Chani. We're going to do it from the perspective of the Fremen on Arrakis, which has some really important consequences too, and we can come back to talk about those a little bit. But I just want to talk about the comparison and contrast there first.
Okay.
Although they are saying totally different approach, totally different angle, right, of looking at these things, at the end of the day, it's the same philosophy, right? It's the same. It's an info dump. It's a much more visually engaging info dump.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a very different, because info dump wise, it is an info dump, but we do have so much other visual stuff going on with the 21 version that makes it feel more like an action engaged.
Yes.
That it's much more world building, because you're seeing all of these things happen as they're dumping the info. So it feels way more engaging, whereas the previous one is just like reading. I was watching her eyeballs to see if she was actually reading a teleprompter because it was just so
Right.
wooden,
Yes.
directly reading off of a page.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Yeah, and I agree. There are many people I know who are a big fan of that actress and of her delivery. I mean, it's always funny when you go to like YouTube versions of the opening and you see people commenting like,
Yeah.
"This is one of the classic sci-fi openings of all time. It compares to the Star Wars crawl." And I'm like, "Really? You think?"
To be fair, I mean, again, like
Okay.
3 minutes into it, I guess 5 minutes into it, because 3 minutes is just info dump, but like 5 minutes into it, I was like, you can see why this has a cult following. Like, it is so stylized, it is
Yeah.
so unique
Yeah.
that I can see why it has that same kind of iconic following, but it doesn't strike me as quite as impactful as Star Wars.
No, not quite as impactful. No, but anyway, and I'm not just trying to diss on the '84 film. As I think I
No,
said last
no.
time, I thought I liked it. I was much more interested in it when I rewatched it than when I saw it in the '80s and '90s. But anyway, I what I was alluding to before when I said that the approach is so different, like both of them, both films are clearly feeling the impulse to say like we have to contextualize, we have to
Yes.
ground this. You could easily have started a film with an opening scene that looked just exactly like the one that is described here, right? Of
Yeah.
the Reverend Mother being, I almost said Mother Superior, the Reverend Mother being taken,
Yeah.
in and like peeking in the door and seeing Paul sleeping and talking to Jessica, and all of like that. That would have been an easy opening scene to do. And of course,
And that is pretty much the second scene we get in the 21 version.
yes,
And you're right, if the info dump was removed, that would still be a fairly
it would
effective
work.
opening scene.
It would
Yeah.
work, but they resist. I mean, they could have done that. They didn't do that, right? Why not? Why not? What is it? Is it something in genre? Is it because
Mhm.
they're they feel a need to really establish, like, we need to plug you somehow into the world. We need you to understand what's going on here. I don't know. I'm. It's just it was very striking to me.
Yeah, I wonder if there's something in it about, I'm thinking about like the Star Trek opening space, the Final Frontier, like if everyone's just so indoctrinated with any kind of science-based factual presentation of
Right.
alternative
Right.
futures or whatever has to be kind of grounded in this documentary-esque vibe.
Yeah,
Like, do
maybe.
we really need to give this much history? No, like we could tell a story in a different way, but maybe giving that much history adds to the world building. Like, look at the depth of this world that we have created.
Yeah.
But there's so many other films that we've talked about that doesn't do that, and the world is revealed, and that also works.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wonder what it is about this one specifically that made them feel like they had to do a massive dump of names and places.
Yeah. I don't know, but when I think about the effect of it, um, when I think about the effect of it, I find it really important. I find it really revealing about the story. Well, I was going to say the story they believe they're telling, but that's getting inside their heads.
Hmm.
Whatever they think they're telling, the story that they're actually telling is significantly. So, okay. This brings me around to what I would identify as the most important difference between the opening of the book and the openings of the two films. By far, most important difference. You watch the opening sequence of the '84 film. What's the story about? As you said, political, economic drama. Presumably drama. Presumably there's going to be drama. We don't know what the drama is yet, but there's going to be drama, right? And it's going to be focused on Dune, right? On Arrakis. I'll come back to that, actually. The connection that all three of them have to the title, Dune, is actually, I find that's a really interesting thing, too. But anyway, okay. This is going to be a political and economic history, and the focal point of this, the centerpiece of that drama, is going to be the planet Arrakis. That's what we're told. That is the entire frame that we have for the story. That's what the 84 film is about. What's the 21 film about? What is it telling us it is about in that opening sequence, right? It is about the experience of the Fremen. It is about sort of the relation,
good guys, the bad guys.
Yeah, the relationship between the indigenous Fremen and the like aristocratic oppressors, right? Who come in Harkonnens first, and who's gonna? That's the opening question that's left at the end.
Who our next oppressor is going to be?
Right. Who our next oppressor is going to be? So that's what that's what we're told this story is going to be about, right? And we're prompted to think from the Fremen perspective by having both by what we see and by the voiceover from Chaney there in the start. So okay, so this is a Fremen experience. Who's going to be oppressing the Fremen next? It's again sort of political drama, right? Except with this different focus, especially on relationship with the indigenous people. That's what this story's about.
And about the incredibly blunt statement about a Messiah. You know, I mean, having that brought into it really does change the tone of what we're about to engage with.
And that's the one element of the 21 film that starts to get at what it seems to me is the entire core of the opening of the book, right? The book, the opening of the book is all about Paul. It's all this is the story of the mythic figure, right? I mean, just consider the sentence: to begin your study of the life of Muad'Dib, then stop.
Yeah.
Okay, right? So I don't know who that is, right? But apparently, it is assumed that a study of the life of Muad'Dib is what I am in fact beginning, right? And that the life of Muad'Dib is such that many people would in fact do so, right? And that it takes special care in order to properly understand and context. I mean, again, this is really, like, for instance, you would not, if you take a kind of run-of-the-mill important historical figure, right? Nobody would talk like that. You wouldn't say, like, to begin your study of the life of Abraham Lincoln, then take care that you place him in his time. Born in Illinois in the 19th century. It's like, well, duh. Yeah, of course. Like, you don't have to say that. Like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, this is even the context, like everything that we know about the political context of the world. 57th year of the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV, the planet Arrakis, all of that stuff is in context. Like, we're prompted from the beginning. All of this only matters, right? The Emperor, the timing, the politics, the setting only matters because it will help you to understand the life of Muad'Dib properly, right? I mean, he is the epic figure, right? And we're then given this the special, like, key information that gives us the only context we receive for the beginning of the chapter, right? Do not be deceived by the fact that he was born on Caladan and lived his first 15 years there. So he's going to be 15 years old at the start of the story, right? Which we would not know if Princess Irulan hadn't told us that, right? And we are told that Arrakis is forever his place. First sentence, in the week before their departure to Arrakis, right? So now we know, right? He's 15. He is on the brink. This is a mythic figure on the brink of going to the place that is forever his place, right? the legend, the myth, the story, whatever it is, and we haven't the faintest idea what that is, right, is just about to start unfolding. It's all about Paul. It's all about that myth. So we get a hint in the use of that word Messiah in the 21 opening, right? But that's the only gesture at this kind of the mythic freight that is given to the life of Muad'Dib, which is it's the only dump we get. It's the entire context of the start of this story.
I do feel like the 21 version tries to play with the mythic feel of it way more than the 84, if you want to do a comparison, but just like generally. And even like from the very start, I'd forgotten that dreams quote, which I did say, but now I'm not going to remember it. Dreams are messages from the deep.
Yes.
That dream quote happens before the studio titles, so you see that and hear the chant. That
the Sardaukar hymn, yes.
Yeah, before you see the Warner Brothers logo and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
So like setting it up like that even kind of feels like, what am I about to engage with? You know, it's actively sucking you into this very mythic feeling thing. And then the visuals that went along with it. I remember when we first did a review of Dune, I think it was for Mythgard Movie Club, and we were just, or maybe it was with Dom Trevor, and we were talking about the world building, because it was one of the first films in the last decade or so that I've been visually in awe of.
It was amazing.
I didn't understand what I was watching because I didn't know special effects could do that.
Yes.
I mean, I watch a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and I didn't know that was an option. Like, it was so good. So it just, with the visuals and that kind of entry, I felt like I had already given in to feeling like this was a mythical story.
Yes.
Which is a little bit more like the text. Whereas the 84 version, I was kind of sleepy by the end of that introduction.
Of the info dump,
Sorry. Yeah, and it's just such a solid still shot of an extreme close-up, and the fade in, fade out is our only variation, and I found that distracting rather than engaging.
Right.
So it's, tough comparison, but the myth element really worked for me in the 21 version of just kind of giving us that entry. Not to the same way, it's just a different way to kind of give that vibe. We're not telling you about this mythic creature. You'll soon learn that there's a what's it called? Foretelling, a
prophecy, yeah.
Prophecy, thank you.
Yeah.
I was like, fifth Harry Potter. There's a prophecy and stuff that you could kind of lean into that, but...
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, though, again, it seems to me that especially through the opening of the 21, I agree with you about that sense of awe, right? I mean, I'm not sure I've ever on the big screen seen a spaceship rising from the surface of a planet look as like awe-inspiring, as mammoth and awe-inspiring as it does in the beginning of that film. Like, it's everything that they do. They I mean, all like the lights on the spice crawlers, right? As they, through the dust. Oh, it's just amazing. Like, just the visuals are incredible. But that the mythic sense that they invoke, this sense of, like, as you said, this is something larger than life. This is like something I've never experienced in my life, which films often can accomplish. Have almost never experienced on film, which is rare for a film to accomplish, right? And yet, all of the sort of the mythic focus of that was on the world, essentially. Not on Paul, not on the character. Paul. On Muad'Dib. Or, again, this figure of Muad'Dib, whom we don't even know yet.
Yeah, we don't get that till later.
Yeah. And that's, I think, a really important... And that strikes me as a difference that is consistent, even in the 21 version. Do you think it's just... You tell me if you think I'm going too far with this. But I think it's fair to say that the book, it's about Paul. Like, I'm not saying nothing else matters. I'm not saying nothing else is interesting. I'm not saying nothing else is important. It is the story of Muad'Dib, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he is the dominant. The entire point of the book, it really fulfills the promise given to us in the first couple sentences of this opening epigram, right? Like, we are beginning our study of the life of Muad'Dib, and by the end, we see how he has become the mythic figure. We understand the legend of Muad'Dib, how he came to be who he was, how this came to be. To some extent, we come to understand, like, the reality and the myth and all those kinds of things, right? But the myth of Muad'Dib is really what the book is, really the focal story of the book. I don't think that's true in the film. I don't
I'm
think
certainly
it's
not getting that feeling yet. I mean, we only have part one, right? Like, we
right.
still have more coming, but just by that introduction, it feels more like the Fremen and the plight of these underdogs
For sure.
is way stronger.
Yeah.
And that whole political tension is really what is driving this story forward. And again, I'm always looking for a through line. So, like, I would think that it would be the plight of the Fremen is more of a through line than Paul, who's a facilitator. Like, he's
Right.
making it move.
Right. Right.
But yeah, whereas in the book, like, Paul is the through line. There isn't a story without him.
Yes. Yes. And of course, like, and again, I don't want people to misunderstand. I'm not saying that I think the film has displaced things 100 miles, right? The myth of Muad'Dib is a Fremen myth, right? I mean, when at the end of the book we come to understand who Muad'Dib is and how the myth grew and what it means, it is like understanding what it means to the Fremen, understanding, like, all of these things are it's still a Fremen thing. But I think it's still a significant and important shift that it's like a question of ends, right? The end of the book is for us to understand, to conclude our study of the life of Muad'Dib, right? To understand the myth. I just, again, as Irulan is so interested that we do understand it properly, right? Put it in its right context, understand what it means. In the film, I'm not saying Paul, Muad'Dib is not and is not going to become a mythic figure, but the function of it is not. The point is not to understand the myth. The point is is the Fremen. That's like, it's what happens. I mean, it's a means to an end. It's a means to a different end.
And you feel super engaged and invested in Paul because there is a real affinity to make him our protagonist. Mm-hmm. And it's Timothée Chalamet, so of course everyone's in love with him. Like, right. There is a certain, lean into that. But that's not the purpose, right? Like, the Fremen are the ones that are the win or lose here. Paul is kind of the narrator to carry us along the storyline.
Right.
You care about it. Like, he is set up to be a hero, but we're more interested in why he's being heroic rather than the hero, which is an interesting
exactly
take on it.
It's a in some ways almost a small distinction, right? Again, he's still the protagonist. He's still, they are staying true to many of the, they're really bringing in many of these mythic things, and yet it's focused towards a different end. Merely having an understanding of Paul, his character, and his impact. That's not, and the opening signals that really clearly, right? What do we care about? We care about the Fremen experience.
Yeah.
Right, that's what we care about.
Oppressor going to be? Who's
our next oppressor going to be? Yes, that's, and so everything that we learn about the mythic, the mythic character of Paul is sort of towards that end. Paul is even less, and we don't even get the one reference to Messiah in the 84 version, right? There it's just setting the scene for a political drama, he's going to be the most important figure in that political drama, right? Again,
Yeah.
it's, it's not like I'm not saying that either film is shoving Paul aside. He's still the protagonist. He's still the focal point in a lot of ways. But he's not the story.
Yeah.
In the same way.
That's a nice distinction, though. I don't know if I really thought that hard on it before, but it's pretty clear. And these change a little bit too. Like now we have a trailer for part two, and you can see a slightly different story is unfolding. If we're just talking openings, we have three different focuses.
Yeah, yeah. And so far in part one, I did feel that the 21 film really did follow through on that difference, basically. The difference between with the focus on Paul and not. Let's talk about can I talk about the title thing for a second?
Yeah. Yeah.
All three go out of their way to introduce Arrakis, right?
Yeah.
The title is Dune, which is a nickname for Arrakis, which is the setting. So when the title is the setting, that already signals something, right? Puts us in a particular sort of place, a particular framework. Emphasis on world building to some extent, right? The world is the story in some way. Though again, in the book, that quickly gets sort of turned around, right? Arrakis, the planet known as Dune, so we get the introduction of the title there in the last sentence of the epigram. Arrakis, the planet known as Dune, is forever his place, right? So we're immediately prompted, like, we care about Dune because of Muad'Dib, right? Because that's important for Paul and his legend. In the hardly an epigram, the info dump in the 84 film also builds up to the name, right?
Yeah.
Arrakis, known as Dune. Except there it is it's like that is the stage on which this political drama is going to be played. Not by coincidence. Again, they emphasize that like Dune is super important. It's not only the setting; it's also like the point of contention, right? It's also the there must be a word for this, but I can't think of what the word is. If Harry Potter is the protagonist of the first book, the Philosopher's Stone is what? Like focal point, central thing. Like, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's the thing which is the whole center point of the story. Or like the ring in the Lord of the Rings, right? The ring isn't exactly the protagonist, but it's the
MacGuffin. That's what everybody's saying.
The MacGuffin?
It's the MacGuffin.
Okay, I don't think I've ever fully understood that word, actually.
I haven't either, but I guess it works because we're all like, MacGuffin?
Okay. I guess. Yeah, I don't understand I don't understand the like connotations of that word. I've never really understood it. It's from Alfred Hitchcock. Okay, yeah, that would explain why I don't understand it. Because I've never been strong on. I've seen some Hitchcock films. I've never been strong on Hitchcock. Anyway, like it's the thing the story is focused on, right? So
it's a facilitator. It's the thing that tells the story.
yeah. So Arrakis is not just the backdrop, right? It is the point of contention, right? It is like the Ring of Power. It is like the Philosopher's Stone. Okay, see, JJ, I had a vague suspicion of that. JJ gives the definition as an object, event, or character in a film. This is MacGuffin. An object, event, or character in a film or story that serves to set and keep the plot in motion despite usually lacking intrinsic importance. That last part was the thing I had a vague suspicion of, and why I don't think that applies here. Because, like, the Ring of Power is not a MacGuffin. It has an intrinsic importance. and it's not just a premise to keep things rolling. That is the vague sense that I had of that there was some kind of connotation there that I didn't feel worked. Arrakis isn't a MacGuffin either in that sense, right?
Yeah.
It does keep the plot in motion. You could say, I suppose, that the Philosopher's Stone is a MacGuffin, as it never gets used, and it's more of a concept than a thing. Like, it certainly doesn't. It does not itself do anything in the way that, like, the Ring of Power does, or that Arrakis does, right? In that
It
way.
affects Nicholas Flamel, and that's about it.
Right, or we're told that it does, but of course we never
Yeah.
meet him either. So, so yeah, that's all pretty theoretical. Right. Good. Zenkai Khan says it's the thing in the story the characters care about and moves the plot forward, but the audience doesn't necessarily care about. And
Yeah.
yes, the Maltese Falcon seems like a perfect illustration of that, actually. But anyway, okay. So that's not exactly what that's not what Arrakis is, because again, it does matter, and we are led to care about it. The introduction to Dune, to Arrakis, is most significantly different in the 21 film, right? Because again, since the whole rooting of the story within the context of that opening is the Fremen experience, it is a native Arakeen perspective, right? These are the natives of Arrakis. They know Arrakis. Well, I say natives. People are going to yell at me for that. I know the Fremen came there a long time before. Never mind. Doesn't matter. The point is, from the point of view of the movie, it is they are the indigenous peoples. They are the natives dealing with the imperialistic interlopers. Yeah. So, given that we get it from its perspective, we get a very different feel. Arrakis matters. Dune matters because it's their home, right?
Yeah.
It matters. Like, if we're led to care about them and their plight, as I think we are in the opening of the 21 film, it's for their sake that we care about Dune, right? Think about the difference with the spice, how the spice is introduced. We know about the spice. We're told about the spice and about spice farming in both of the film adaptations, right? In the 84 film, we're told about it only in the context of economic and political power. Because it's the most valuable and most important substance in the universe, Arrakis is wicked important, as we would say here.
And the focus on, like, the necessity of space travel, right? I feel like they really hammered that home.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's not just expensive for a frivolous reason, right? This is why
it's not a diamond.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It is absolutely crucial. Whereas again, in the 21 film, the spices only comes up as the reason that the oppressors have come, right? The justification, right, of for the oppressors to be coming in and oppressing the Fremen. Yeah. Once again, you can see how the Fremen are being kind of almost put into the Paul place, the Muad'Dib place, right? That the book establishes. Yeah. Can I say another thing about frame? I love the fact that the 84 film tries to do. I say tries. Oops, that's perhaps a little bit too judgy, but they are clearly attempting to preserve the concept of the Princess Irulan frame, which the 21 film makes no attempt at doing. Right? We get the character of Princess Irulan, like she's but we don't have anything that corresponds to her epigrams that begin every chapter of Dune, or almost every chapter of Dune. But
We don't even have her, right? In the 21 version, she doesn't.
I don't think we saw her, did we? I don't know.
She's
No.
in the trailer for part 2, and that was a big deal to see her in the
Yeah.
trailer. So I don't
Yeah.
think we've seen any
I think that's what
mention
I
of
was
her.
thinking of. Yeah, she doesn't.
Yeah.
She in the story, like in the actual narrative of the book, she doesn't come in until the final scene,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think she gets lines.
Hmm.
Ironically, the one whose voice we've been hearing consistently throughout the entire book, I don't think speaks in the book itself.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, she's a figurehead.
Yeah.
You know, whom he's going to marry in order to, which of course she doesn't really betray the fact that she is the wife of Muad'Dib. In fact, that she's talking about her husband is not something you can tell from her writing. But in any case, sorry, I'm pausing here. I'm struggling because this is a place where I find it really difficult to resist that like knee-jerk vocabulary of complaint, right? I would, because we're all friends here, I will just confess what I almost said without thinking about it, which is I almost started talking about how like they tried to do this but really screwed it up, or like that they didn't understand how the
But
epigrams
as
work
we've
in the
said,
book.
sometimes that is very helpful conversation because it shows where something jars. So then it
Yes,
becomes a talking point for us to go through. So that's
exactly.
okay.
But
Emotions are
I'm not
good.
going to assume that they're dumb, and I'm not going to assume that they're failing. What instead I'm going to begin by observing is that their framing, the whole concept of their framing mechanism, is completely different. The primary difference is Princess Irulan is talking to us directly, to us, the audience, with our butts in the seats watching the screen. She addresses us. Now, you might say, like, well, but she's addressing you. She's speaking in the second person in this epigram in the book, too. How is it different? It's different because it's a quotation from a book we've never seen or read that we know to be written at a different time. We're only like eavesdropping on this,
Yeah.
right? Princess Irulan is speaking to us. And what's more, she's speaking spontaneously. Remember that line
Yeah.
in the middle where she's like, oh, I forgot to tell you,
Yeah.
right? She actually
Yeah, I was gonna
says,
say, like,
oh, I forgot to tell you.
and the text being from the manual by Prince. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
the
edited. That
quotation.
is curated. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yes.
That's a very different delivery.
It's that the, I actually think, on the whole, the citations of the epigrams at the starts of the chapter are more impactful than the quotations themselves in establishing the like mythic frame of Muad'Dib.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's not just that, like the fact that there is a manual of Muad'Dib, manual, right? That
Yeah.
word, manual, like you need a handbook on Muad'Dib. That suggests that studying the life of Muad'Dib is not just something you might do like you might study the life of Abraham Lincoln if you find him interesting, right?
Right.
But that this is practical, right? You know, in order for you to succeed in life, you must study the life of Muad'Dib. Here's your manual to Muad'Dib, right? But again, that by itself would have been,
Yeah.
if every single one of the quotations at the beginning of the chapters were from that book, it would have a striking effect, right? But there are like 15 different titles by Princess Irulan about Muad'Dib. She clearly has written many, and again, as those begin to accumulate, right? Anyway, the citations, really important. In the film, instead, the kind of framing mechanism that they get, the citation makes the epigram actually more distant than the main narrative, right? It feels like you're now beginning a direct experience, whereas even though it's the epigram is second person, right? It seems to be talking to us directly. It's more distant because, in fact, we're just reading a quotation out of a book that we don't even know, right? It's almost like overheard conversation. Whereas in the week before their departure to Arrakis, when all the final scurrying about had reached, this is immediate. We're watching this happen in real time, right? In the film, the effect is completely opposite. She is speaking to us directly, spontaneously, in real time. Oh, I forgot to tell you, right? And that, therefore, that sets the entire narrative of the film itself as chronologically and geographically removed from us. On that, we're a spectator, right? We're sitting there chatting with Princess Irulan, and then together we're going to watch. Is almost like the effect of it. I mean, not together we're going to watch in like an MST3K sense, but though an MST3K approach to Dune by the Princess Irulan would be awesome.
Would be pretty cool.
That would be really, really great. But anyway, that should be done, actually. Oh, so my goodness.
That's a fan tracks option.
Yes. It's like, the like fan tracks within like the quasi-fictional analytical frame. Oh,
so basically, we're fan fictioning fan tracks.
Fan fiction commentaries. Yeah. Oh, no, that's a genre that needs to happen.
That could be a whole lot of fun.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm going off on so many other stories
exactly.
right now, too.
Imagine a Gandalf commentary on the Lord of the Rings films. Yeah.
A Charlie commentary on Twilight.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have a good time with it.
No,
anyway.
this is a thing. No, hang on. This is a thing.
I know, this is a thing.
Okay. All right. Okay. No, that's actually really that's really delightful. That's really delightful.
A Mary Bennett commentary on Pride and Prejudice.
Oh man, there's so many you could do. Could do. It just like yeah. Well, nobody could endure listening to a Lydia commentary on Pride and Prejudice, but
well, I originally thought Mr. Collins, and I was like,
no, Mr. Bennett though. A Mr. Bennett commentary.
Mr. Bennett would be great.
Yeah, Mr. Bennett would be awesome. Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Gardner. I would listen to a Mrs. Gardner commentary. She would have like this sensible, let me tell you what's really going on and what they're all doing wrong, kind of, sort of slightly snarky, but like benevolent and wise commentary.
Bingley's sister, Mrs. Bingley. I would probably follow that one.
Miss Bingley? Oh yeah, that would be fun to do. That would be
snarky and judgmental and
horrible.
Kind of
yeah, no, that would be a lot of fun. That would be a lot of fun. Yeah. I just, and thinking of the Lord of the Rings from so many different perspectives. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. The eye.
in that with that like, I see you kind of voice. Yeah. Edith, no, I agree. The Farmer Maggot commentary. Oh man, yeah.
That would be fun.
If you could get somebody with the accent who could pull it off, the Gaffer Gamgee commentary on the Lord of the Rings could be hilarious. Anyway, yeah. So no, this is this. Yeah, Gregory Simons. I'm just thinking exactly the same thing.
Some of them are really tricky, though. You know, I'm thinking about Lord of the Rings, and I'm like, it would have to be somebody that does travel. You know, I'm like, oh, the bartender at the pub at Bray, that'd be phenomenal. But he only
Butterbur.
Really need.
Well, because like some people like the Gaffer and and like Butterbur. A lot of it would be beyond their own. Oh, they'd spend the whole movie being like, "Whoa, what the heck is that?" Right? Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. This is.
This is a fun tangent to go down. Is what this is.
This is a very fun tangent to go down. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Feels like another when we do another call fundraiser, like you guys get to choose which fictional
Yes.
commentary we create. But I don't think I'd be clever enough to do it. I feel like we need to work with an actual actor and like create a script and make this happen because
I
it'll
think
be
I would.
good.
I think I would love to help with the script of that. I think I doubt I would be the best person to deliver it, but
Or you get like five of us in a room that all know the book well enough and you just bounce off each other and it
yeah,
becomes like a comedic routine.
yeah, yeah.
Be fun.
Oh
Yeah.
man, yeah, that would be awesome. Um, yeah. Okay. Anyway, um, Princess
Oh,
Irulan. That's what I was talking about. Okay, so frame. All right, I'm back. I worked my way all the way back my mental breadcrumb trail. Princess
I was like,
Irulan,
where
frame
are we?
of
Frame.
84 versus. Okay, yeah. So what is the so I'm trying to approach the frame of the 84 version constructively rather than just saying that they missed the point and have gotten it wrong. They are doing it very differently, and
Yeah.
the what mattered to, and again it fits, at least it goes in the same direction as the change that they make to um, the lack of focus on Paul, right? The I don't want to say demythologizing, because that's not necessarily fair to say of the whole film. But again, the decentralization of Paul, of Muad'Dib, right? This is not the Muad'Dib story. That's not at all what we're told at the beginning in the info dump in 84. So the distance, in a large part, the function of the frame, I think the primary impact of the frame in the book, with those citations, right, is to build up this sense of myth. It's not only myth; it's mythic history.
Hmm.
We are being told before we begin not only that Muad'Dib is a mythic character or will become a mythic character, but like the history books have already been written about it.
And they're very structured and
Yes.
detail oriented.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. This
Like
is yeah.
like a one-off Sunday afternoon paperback. Like there are full postgraduate degrees focused on this.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And that provides such an important, when we're seeing the Reverend Mother walk down, this old woman walking down, this old crone, as we're introduced to her in the first sentence, right, walking down the hall, and seeing the boy Paul, right? I mean, just look at that first sentence that's there on the screen, right? An old crone came to visit the mother of the boy Paul, right? We come to that with, we don't even know for sure that Paul is this mythic Muad'Dib figure, but we probably have a suspicion, right? Even in sentence one, we have a
It's
suspicion.
fair to think that we would assume that. Yeah.
Right. So again, the purpose of the frame is to kind of propel us into the story in these ways, right? With these,
Options naturally that work.
yeah, yeah. What is the effect of the kind of frame that Princess Irulan establishes in the 84 film is a totally different kind of frame. It is we're conveying information to you, but we're going to do it in a sense. It is. I'm not saying it has the impact of, but it's similar to the crawl in Star Wars, right? We're beginning by conveying to you background information that is important for you to contextualize the scene you're about to see, right? This is going to make little sense to you if you don't know some basic things. Here is your basic intro to the story, right? And in a sense, like, whether or not it succeeds perfectly or not, by having it be not only just not only is it not text, not only is it's not even just voiceover, it's her face, like she's there on screen. I am talking to you. I am making direct eye contact with you. and I am talking to you spontaneously. Oh, I forgot to mention, right? So we're receiving all this information, but I think they're trying to personalize it, right? They're trying to, like, it's being shared with me personally. I'm, being invited to care, not only to remember these names, but I'm being invited to care about this.
Yeah, I mean, because it does feel kind of live. It's like it's an infomercial or a news broadcast. There is like very much a I'm coming to you live from
Right, right,
yeah,
right. Though we do still have that sense of history, right? She's talking about things that did happen, and she from her own point of view, she is clearly looking back on these events while we
yes,
don't.
it's live, but
Yeah.
it's a retrospective.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. So, and which again, notice how that too has the effect that I was describing of distancing the main narrative, right? It's the
yeah,
frame that's immediate and the main narrative is distant, which again is the flip of what the frame in the book accomplishes.
yeah.
But anyway, I so again, I'm trying not to say that they just did it wrong, but what they're doing is a very different thing, and goes in an entirely different direction. Has almost the opposite effect of has almost the opposite effect of the frame in the book. And this is one of those things, as you've said many times, the question of how faithful is it to the book is not a sensible question, right? Because they are, in a sense, they are being much more faithful to the book than the 21 film, right?
And in a sense is the key phrase that you
Yeah,
just uttered,
yeah,
because everybody's in a sense is going to be different here. So
yeah.
what are we faithful to?
Right, right, exactly. I mean, it depends on what matters to you, right? Because I mean, I wonder, Maggie. I remember when I did a really detailed. Unfortunately, this has been mostly lost to history because I used lots of clips. This was before YouTube cracked down on this, and so it was retroactively cut. It no longer appears on our YouTube channel. But at the end of my my Watership Down class in Mythgard Academy, I did a long discussion of the famous horrifying, bloody Watership Down cartoon. It was one of the places where I was really wrestling with. I'm afraid I was probably a little bit more dismissive than I ought to have been. I hadn't benefited from all that I've learned in the last couple of years, but one of the conclusion I remember saying is that that is an extremely faithful adaptation in a lot of ways. Like, they stay very, very close to the book. And I remember sort of joking that they were extremely faithful to everything in the book except for everything that mattered. I mean, it's a really fascinating example of a story which follows very, very closely and yet manages to tell a story that goes in a totally different direction and feels very, very different from the original story. I think that's a really
That's interesting.
yeah, it's a fascinating illustration. Again, it's one of the things that I often think of when people are talking about faithfulness, because on one level, like, you could scarcely ask for more in terms of faithfulness than that adaptation gives you, and yet I think it's so far from the core and spirit of the original in every way that matters. And I think the 84 opening is a good example. Now, I'm not saying that I think that I think there's a significant risk in the 21 opening. There's, with all of the wonderful things that it does, again, it does make a really strong statement that this film is interested in the experience of the Fremen as oppressed indigenous people. It's not fundamentally a story about the epic, not epic, about the mythic and legendary figure of Muad'Dib.
Right.
And that's a very, very significant change, which I will be interested to see how that pans out. Like, what that means in the end. But anyway, that is. So yes, there is a clear shift in focus in the 21 film. A shift in frame, which seems to be very deliberate. The deliberateness of it seems to me to be suggested by the similarity of having a female voiceover info dump at the start, and yet, doing it from such a pointedly different perspective. And yet, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. In the end, do they how far away from the book do they go? And again, here's the thing that really burns the biscuits of many people. Of course, it doesn't really matter if they go somewhere else. Like, they're not obligated really to do the same thing and to tell the same story.
They're not. That's what is so interesting. If you're not going to tell that story, tell me why.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
and I'm saying that as like a fan, but also that would be the question I would bring into the creative space of like, why aren't you following that line? Why is your story better slash more important slash more engaging slash more successful, whatever?
Right. Right.
Gonna changes. Great.
Right.
Welcome. That's the beauty of adaptation. But why?
Right. And I think so far, my reaction to the first film in general was that I'm satisfied so far with the answer to that question, basically. Even the answer that the opening suggests. The opening suggests to me that we are going to move the center of the story away from the myth of Muad'Dib and towards the Arrakis experience, and tell the story of Muad'Dib in that Fremen context, because we are not only interested in the mythic figure of Muad'Dib, but we are interested in the experience. We want to put in center stage the experience of the Fremen and their response to that myth, rather than just the myth itself. That to me is a satisfying answer to that question. I can get behind that.
I think that's also a really interesting way to frame it, because basically they're covering their butts and giving themselves two opportunities for success. Where if you just tell the story of Muad'Dib as this mythical creature, that runs a risk, because we have a lot of chosen one storylines. We have a lot of Christ-like figures, and it's tough to get away from those comparisons.
Yep.
But if you put the plight of an oppressed people alongside an unbelievable hero, and I care about the unbelievable hero, they are developing that mythos really well, that I'm engaged in that, but I need to know how that's going to affect this storyline, because both these things are really important. It's like an insurance policy.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I do think that it is an interesting question. And it's one of the things that I think it comes down, and this is the thing that when I talk about, like, that was before I've learned what I've learned in the last few years. This is one of the core thing that I've learned. The mistake that I always made, and that I think many, many people make, is to think that that the job of an adaptation is to just retell. Like, that it has to be the same thing. Even when Tolkien, in his very thoughtful, far more thoughtful about film adaptation than many Tolkien fans are, his thoughtful, the famous letter in which he's reacting to the Zimmerman script of the potential disastrous Lord of the Rings, or almost certainly disastrous if it had been made, Lord of the Rings adaptation. He talks about a thing that many Tolkien fans love to quote about being true to the core of the original. And I agree with him that there is a core and that that's important, but at the end of the day, what I've come to see is you don't have to, in fact, do the same thing. It's important to a film that seems to be operating in ignorance of that core, like not seeming to know or care what the core of the original one was. This is why, again, to think back to, because when we talked about the core of the original, I think of our Christmas Carol discussions from the year before last now, I guess, technically, from 13 months ago. That's why I think the Blackadder adaptation, which delightfully reverses the Scrooge story, is still occupying the Christmas Carol space, right? It's engaging. It's very much aware of what the core of the story is, and it's doing a very funny, different thing with it, right? And I think potentially the new Dune films are doing an interesting new thing with, if the core of Dune is the myth of Muad'Dib, right? Like how a person comes to mythic status, like what, how legends and myths are born. Like that's kind of the and it wraps in all kinds, like messianic traditions and all kinds of other things into that. The new film is aware of that. It's not disregarding it, right? It's not just kind of setting that aside or pretending that that doesn't exist, but it's also not developing. It's doing a different spin. It's doing a different take. It's putting the focus in a different place. It's telling it from a different perspective. And that's interesting. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
And these are the tricky things we have to keep reminding ourselves. When you were talking about Watership Down, it was like, it's okay to feel reaction and to discuss that reaction. It's not okay to write it in stone as if it's the only option.
Right.
So, I want to see an adaptation based on a book I love, tell it the way I love it. So that's why you're disappointed when something comes out differently, because that's not what I love. You changed it.
Right. That's not. Yes.
That's the reaction.
Either so you have failed to glimpse what I love about it. Like I hoped that we shared something about it, and apparently we don't. Right.
And I kind of trusted you with this beautiful thing, and now you've broken my trust. Like there's all these super emotional, close to my heart things, because that's how we feel about story. But it's the line that you said, an adaptation doesn't have to stay true to a text. It doesn't have to, but we would like it to sometimes. We would wish it would sometimes. There's all these different variations that, like, whatever emotions you're bringing to watching an adaptation are valid, and your reactions are valid, but they're not the be-all, end-all. So it's just kind of a nice impetus and a nice way to investigate some of this. Different ways to tell a story are so cool. Or can be. Some of them can be god-awful and maybe not be as successful, in your opinion. So,
right.
Yeah.
Phil is asking, is it about Muad'Dib or about what he did? And I would say neither. It's about the idea. It's about the myth. It's about, I don't know. I have a hard time thinking of any book that is more interested in the very concept of myth than Dune is I think one of the ways that I would say it. Storyteller, one thing I would say in response, Storyteller on YouTube, one of the things I would say in response to your comments about, you didn't like the really huge epic, and I hear the word you use is pretentious, which I hear, like, I can understand that reaction. The reason where I disagree with that is that I think it is a big part, sort of, Maggie, like you were describing before. It's not just like I'm trying to impress you. It is the sense of, as is appropriate to a story which is so focused on myth, the creation and invocation of awe is a really important element of Dune. I mean, I would say it's an essential element of Dune. If you don't experience awe, whether it's the awe of the sandworms, like the sandworms invoke awe, like he goes so far out of his way, not just to make them scary, but to make them awful, like full of awe. To the size of the spaceships, even, like everything is huge. Everything is designed to invoke this sense of awe and wonder. And again, that's very fitting. It strikes a very fitting atmosphere in a story which is primarily about myth. And so I think that any film that does not invoke awe in that way, and I thought they did a marvelous job. That's why, to me, it didn't feel pretentious. It felt like they are attempting to inspire awe. That's just exactly what I want to see. Like that, there I was feeling like, hey, we are having the same experience of Dune. Like you are loving the same thing about Dune that I am. And so that's what I thought about that. But anyway, yeah.
Zenik on Twitch, I agree. When an adaptation is so radically different, like the 1966 Hobbit animation, comes all the way back around to being fascinating. Yeah, I quite like, you take something and completely spin it on its head. Like, I can remove the emotion and say, well, this is unique, and look at it totally differently.
Though I would say that the Rankin Bass Hobbit is a remarkably, also from a certain perspective, remarkably faithful adaptation of the story. Yes.
In fact, we have 10 tracks on that, don't we?
We do, yeah. Nubita and I talked about that quite a bit. Yeah.
Nice.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Keep in mind, Edith, if anybody wants to talk to you about why Tolkien hated Dune, just don't forget that it's speculation. We don't know why Tolkien hated Dune. We do know that he read it. We do know that he didn't enjoy it. We don't know why. Like Tolkien liked Asimov, did not like Dune. Don't know why. Read them both. Had his preference. Didn't explain. Also hated Lord Peter Wimsey, for which, I have a hard time forgiving him, honestly. But there we are. Okay. All right. We are out of time today, but so next time we're coming towards the end of our openings. I keep saying this, but then we keep thinking more things to do.
Visit openings because it's such a great look at an adaptation, but we think start winding up this element.
Yeah, it's been so useful. It's so instructive for me. But anyway, so we were given a suggestion. So you may remember in our prize drawings, our grand prize drawing. Back in the fundraising campaign, we gave away the opportunity to make suggestions for what to do, and our winner had a bunch of marvelous suggestions.
Was our winner?
Sorry,
Jennifer
Mello. Yes, Jennifer Mello was. Yes. So Jennifer had a bunch of wonderful suggestions, and one of the things that she was interested in seeing was for us to discuss some children's classics, which I think is a really, really great idea. So we're going to be
here.
Yeah, we could spend a lot of time on that. There are a lot of examples of this. But the one we're going to start with, which again was one of Jennifer's suggestions, is Alice in Wonderland. So next time we're going to do openings again. We're going to look at the opening of Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, and then we're going to look at the opening of both the Disney animation and the Johnny Depp one. We're gonna do and we may also strongly. I know I'm strongly tempted to do Winnie the Pooh as well. So we may and Peter
really
Pan,
Pan too.
Yeah. Peter Pan, we may get around to that also. So yes, we will be we'll be looking at multiple versions, or probably several different classic children's stories. Anyway, so we're going to start with Alice in Wonderland. So Alice in Wonderland next time. We'll look at the opening, and it is, of course, I think it is really interesting to look at this. Thinking about the way that that story is framed as a children's story, right, and how that is then it is to me a really, really interesting case study. Just as I was talking about, like, are there drama, or are there genre implications for the way that these films are being introduced, the Dune films are being introduced? What are the genre implications for how a film based on a children's story is being introduced? So anyway, all right. That is what we're going to do next time. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you again next week. Hopefully there's a chance next week might get shifty, but we'll see.
We're planning it next week. I'm driving back from London with a 2-year-old, so as long as I get back in time, we'll be here. But we have
Yes,
an appointment with the embassy to see if we can get a passport. So who knows how long that's going to take?
exactly.
So,
So there's a chance of delays, but in any case, we will do what we can do. All right. Thanks, everybody, and we will see you guys again soon. Bye now.